Welcome to the Economist in Your Ear podcast. Imagine walking out of your annual physical, not just with advice for the next year, but with a highly probable timeline of every major health crisis you might face over the next 2 decades.
Exactly.
I mean, is that level of foresight genuinely on the horizon, or is the technology still, stuck in predictive fiction?
Well, it's certainly moving incredibly fast, and that dividing line is getting blurrier all the time.
Right.
We're here today to talk about Delphi 2M. This is a massive AI model developed through a big collaboration, EMBL, DKFZ, University of Copenhagen. Their paper, it was published in Nature, and it really represents one of the most ambitious claims in predictive medicine we've seen.
Absolutely. And the claim is huge, isn't it? Delphi 2M aims to predict the probability over time for more than 1,000 different diagnoses. I mean, that's everything. Rare genetic conditions, common chronic illnesses. We've had risk calculators before, sure, for specific things like heart attacks or diabetes.
Right.
But this just moves the goalposts entirely.
Exactly. They call this many disease long horizon prediction. So instead of just calculating a single risk score for, say, next year, the goal is to simulate your probable future health trajectory, maybe up to 20 years out, by understanding how getting condition A changes your long-term chances of developing condition B. It's trying to see health not as isolated events, but as this interconnected story.
Okay, let's unpack the mechanics a bit, because they took a concept we're all getting familiar with now, the large language model, the GPT-style architecture, and completely retooled it for medicine. We know LLMs chew through text and predict the next word.
Yeah.
So what's Delphi 2M consuming? What's its text?
It's learning the grammar of disease progression, you could say. Instead of predicting the next word, it's predicting the next diagnosis token. And those tokens are the standardized classification codes, the ICD-10 codes, basically the universal language doctors use worldwide for diagnoses. It eats those codes along with really precise time info, age, and the time passed since the last health event.
Okay, that time component sounds crucial, because in a book, one word just follows the next, right? Instantly. But in a health record, years might pass between two big events, or maybe just days. How did they get the architecture to handle that huge difference in timescales?
Yeah, that was the necessary tweak, the big adjustment they had to make to the underlying GPT structure. They built in a mechanism that gets not just the sequence of events, but the duration separating them. Think about it like this. A high blood pressure diagnosis right after a pregnancy test, that means something very different than if those same two codes were separated by 5 years. The timestamps give that context.
Context.
Yeah, it lets the model distinguish between, say, a possible acute complication and a much longer-term chronic development.
That distinction is really clever. So what's the actual predictive scope here? How far out can this health weather forecast genuinely see?
Well, the model calculates the rate of risk, what they call risk per unit time for all those 1,000-plus diseases. And the authors are careful to frame this as a weather-style forecast, which I think is the perfect analogy. Okay. Like a 50% chance of rain. It's not saying this will happen. It's not deterministic state. It's calculating probabilities, likelihoods based on your history compared to hundreds of thousands of others. And based on that, they can sample potential health paths up to maybe 20 years into the future.
And the initial applications, the way it's being framed, seem twofold. First, the obvious clinical one.
Yeah.
Flag high-risk people for screening or prevention.
Right.
But second, something much broader, affecting us all. Helping health authorities with big-picture population planning.
And that's probably where the long horizon view matters most, at least right now. Imagine if a health authority could run their population data through something like Delphi 2M and project, say, a big spike in specific neurological disorders 10 years down the line.
That gives them a huge heads up.
A massive window. They could proactively allocate budgets, figure out where to build new specialist clinics, make sure they've got the hospital beds needed. It changes healthcare planning from reacting to scrambling to actually planning ahead.
Okay, but any forecast is only as good as the data you feed it, right? The historical climate data, to stick with your analogy. Let's talk about the training data, because that seems to be where the first big caution flag goes up.
It does. So the model was initially trained on data that's often seen as the gold standard in human biology research. The UK Biobank, that's 400,000 participants, incredibly rich data, biological, lifestyle, everything. Then they validated it externally using 1.9 million Danish health records, which are also known for being very comprehensive and long-running.
400,000 detailed records. Sounds almost unbeatable. Is there any reason to be wary about using a data set that impressive as the foundation for predicting everyone's future health?
Oh, absolutely. And this is the crucial critique we really need to keep in mind. While the UK Biobank data is rich, It is not representative of the general population, not at all. It suffers from a well-known issue, healthy volunteer bias, meaning the people who sign up for these really demanding long-term studies, they tend to be healthier, often wealthier, more educated, and disproportionately white compared to the average person on the street.
Okay, so if your model learns the language of disease, mostly from a group that's already healthier, more privileged, what happens when you try to use it in a real clinic, treating, well, everyone else?
It means the model might seriously underestimate risk for more vulnerable populations. Or maybe it just hasn't seen enough complex disease patterns to generalize properly. It might be great at predicting risk for patient A, who looks a lot like the biobank volunteers, but dangerously wrong for patient B, who might be from a lower socioeconomic background with a much more complicated medical history.
Which makes that external validation on the Danish registry really critical then. Did the model actually hold up when they tested it on a broader, more diverse, long-running data set?
It did work, which is, a testament to the underlying architecture. But just as you'd expect, there was a noticeable drop in performance. The headline metric they often use is the AUC score area under the curve. It basically tells you how well the model ranks patients by risk.
Right.
On the cleaner UK data, the 5-year prediction AUC was around 0.76. When they validated it on the more real-world Danish data, it dropped to 0.67.
Okay, that drop isn't totally surprising without retraining, but what's the practical impact of that reduced ranking ability?
Well, it really underscores the author's own warnings, actually. They acknowledge these selection issues. It means you absolutely cannot just take this model and plug it into any hospital system worldwide. Before it gets deployed anywhere, it needs local recalibration. The model has to relearn the specific disease patterns and prevalence rates for that particular hospital or region.
And presumably keep learning.
Exactly. It needs constant monitoring for performance drift because health trends, treatments, they all change over time.
That brings us neatly to the performance metrics themselves. The headlines often grab onto that AUC score 0.76 down to 0.7 for the 10-year forecast. To most people, an AUC of 0.7 sounds, well, pretty decent. But this is the aha moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why is just looking at the AUC score not enough for actual clinical decisions?
Yes, this is so important. As a research metric, AUC is fine. It tells you something useful. But in a clinical setting, I have to stress, AUC absolutely does not equal clinical usefulness, not even close. AUC only tells you how well the model ranks risk. It says if you line up 100 people, the model's pretty good at putting the ones most likely to get sick towards the front and the healthiest towards the back.
But it doesn't tell you if the probability number it gives, say, you have a 40% risk, is actually correct.
Precisely. That's where the missing metrics come in, the ones that are essential for doctors. First, we need calibration. If the model predicts that 40% of people with a certain profile will develop condition X in 5 years, then in the real world, close to 40% of those people must actually develop condition X. If it predicts a 40% but only 10% actually gets sick, the model is badly calibrated. It's misleading for a doctor trying to decide whether to start a treatment right.
It's like that weather forecast that always says 70% chance of rain whether it pours or stays sunny. It might still be right about which days are riskier overall, maybe, but the number itself is useless for planning.
Perfect analogy. And the second missing piece, the really crucial one, is clinical utility. This is the ultimate test. We measure this using things like net benefit analysis. It asks a really fundamental question. Does acting on this model's prediction, maybe prescribing an expensive drug with side effects, actually do more good than harm across realistic thresholds for treatment?
Because you could end up overtreating.
Exactly. If the model flags lots of people as high risk and we intervene, but it turns out many of them wouldn't have gotten sick anyway, well, if we overtreat 10 healthy people to prevent one case, that's a huge cost, potential side effects, patient anxiety, a massive burden.
Okay, so pulling this critique together, the fair way to frame this, at least for now, is that until we see solid published data on calibration and this net benefit idea showing it actually helps more than it harms,
Yeah.
this model looks like a very powerful tool for cohort-level insights, great for population analysis, planning health budgets, that sort of thing.
Yes, precisely.
But for individual patient care in the clinic, it's still very much a maybe.
I agree entirely. It's a fantastic research achievement, no question. But it's not ready to be an automated decision support system sitting on your doctor's desk just yet.
And moving from that forecast to actual action, that seems like the highest hurdle. Clinical value demands that these predictions trigger a specific evidence-based step. You need that clear link. High-risk score leads to this proven intervention. And crucially, without flooding clinics with false alarms or, like you said, causing harm through overtreatment.
And we also need to be realistic about the time horizon. Those 10 or 20-year forecasts, they're likely most reliable for group-level planning. Trying to predict individual risk decades out, it's just inherently noisy. Think about your own life 5 years ago. Could you have predicted everything that's happened since? New job, maybe a health issue, moving house. Life throws curveballs the model hasn't seen. The individual risk bands that far out are probably too wide to be clinically useful for a one-on-one discussion.
So we should really treat those decade-plus claims primarily as a population planning tool for now.
I think that's the safest and most accurate way to view it currently.
But even if the clinical utility was proven tomorrow, we still hit that massive wall: governance and public trust, especially with this volume of incredibly sensitive patient data.
And that constraint is a hard blocker. It's not just a side issue. Privacy and governance aren't footnotes to the science. We saw this with the NHS-linked Foresight project in the UK, similar broad health prediction goals. That project got paused specifically because of huge concerns from the public and from GPs about data governance.
Right.
It just shows no matter how good your AUC score is, if people don't trust how their most personal health data is being used and protected, the model simply won't get off the ground.
Delphi 2M does have a quite clever approach to try and sidestep some of that, though. Because it's a generative model, like the image or text generators we hear about, it can create and train on synthetic patient timelines, fake data. Sounds like the perfect solution, right? Bypass privacy concerns using fake patient data.
It's definitely an incredibly promising direction, and it worked surprisingly well in their study just to validate the predictive power itself. But again, we have to be cautious. Synthetic data sets aren't magic bullets. They can still inadvertently leak patterns from the original data or even amplify existing biases that were present in the real data it learned from.
So fake data can still reveal real, potentially sensitive information.
It potentially can, yes. Unless the process used to generate that synthetic data employs the absolute strongest privacy techniques available, things like differential privacy, which mathematically adds noise to obscure individual records, and unless it's rigorously stress tested against attack testing, actively trying to see if malicious actors could infer real patient details. Only then can we start to consider it properly safe. The promise is huge, but the governance and technical safeguards have to keep pace.
This has been a really insightful look. I mean, despite all the necessary caveats we've discussed, it is a stunning scientific advance. So looking forward, what specific steps need to happen next to move Delphi 2M from being a research success story to potentially becoming a clinical standard?
Well, fundamentally, we need prospective decision-linked trials. That means you take two groups of comparable patients. For one group, doctors use the model's predictions to guide interventions. The other group gets standard care. Then you compare the health outcomes over time. You need that empirical evidence. Does acting on the model actually improve outcomes? Does it save lives, reduce illness cost-effectively? And critically, they need proper comparative baselines. We already have some incredibly strong, well-validated models for specific diseases. Think of QRS for cardiovascular disease risk in the UK.
Right, the established tools.
Exactly. Delphi 2M needs to show convincingly that its complex, one big model-fits-all approach is genuinely better than those highly curated specific tools that are designed and proven for just one critical task.
That sets a very clear and quite high bar for the next phase of research, which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider. We often hear about AI beating these single disease prediction tools, but what tangible real-world evidence would truly convince you that an AI designed to forecast potentially everything is actually better, safer, and more useful than a specialist tool designed and honed over years to forecast just one specific critical health risk? Thanks for listening. Follow us for daily insights into world affairs, and don't forget to like, comment, and share.